You guys can see my screen, right?
Yes.
Okay. So in the last session, we have seen that how we can use custom event to communicate from child to parent, right? So in that we have seen that we need to register event at the child component and we need to handle it on the parent component. So we have seen the syntax and how we can pass parameter and on the parent side how we can write handler method and perform the logic whatever we want to perform, right? So after that we also seen that how do we display different types of post messages, right? Warning messages, error messages, success messages. So based on some conditions, like similarly in the standard, if we save the record, right, we see success messages, and some standard validations fires we also see some error messages there, right? So if you want to customize something in your customization, if you want to validate your things, validate your logic, we can definitely use these toast messages and we can display different types of messages. Okay, now today we're going to see the component lifecycle hooks and the component lifecycle. So you guys can see my screen, right? So this is the lifecycle flow of the components. So this is the diagram which is there in the standard documentation as well. If you guys can see from where it starts, right? So this is the starting point of it. You guys can see the very first time whenever if you build any lightning component and put it in the or embed in the lightning page or somewhere in the Salesforce, right? So first of all, very first constructor called on the parent. So very first time parent components constructor get called. Second thing, whatever public properties we have, that public properties will get updated, right? If we are pulling some values into those properties default, so those properties will get pulled after the constructor get called. Next, parent inserted into the DOM. I will tell you what is DOM. So after loading these properties, right, public properties on the parent component, this parent component will get inserted into the DOM, means a document object model gets created for this parent component. Then connected callback called on the parent. I will tell you what is this connected callback is. So the connected callback is whenever your components gets loaded, this method will get called very first, meaning it's similar to the init method in the Aura component. So this connected callback of the parent component will get called. Next, the parent component gets loaded. Fully loaded means whatever HTML template and whatever user interactions, user framework for user will get loaded on the page. Then next thing is constructor will get called on the child component. So once these things happen, right, the first thing we have seen that constructor on the parent component will get loaded first, means constructor will get called. Then second thing, all the pending properties or the properties, public properties will get pulled. Then parent inserted into the DOM. I'll show you what is DOM and how we can see. Then connected callback method will get called. This method is getting called once your component gets loaded on the page. Parent render means once all the whatever UI we have, right, it will get loaded on the page. Then if we have child component, child LWC component, then the child components constructor will get called. Then similarly, it will load the properties of the child component. Then child component will get inserted into the DOM. Connected callback of the child component will get called, meaning once it's loaded, right? Once it's loading very first, it will call this method, similarly init method. So on load of the component, if you want to put some logic, you can put it into this method. Then child component will get rendered. All the UI things will get loaded, and the rendered callback on the child component will get called. So once the component loaded, right, fully loaded, then this rendered callback is method of this lifecycle will get called on the child. And then after loading this child component, right, fully loading this child component, then parents render callback method will get called. So this is the life cycle of the LWC component. So this is the process that happens at the backend. Means if we embed components like this, right, and if we refresh this page, so at the backend we don't know what is happening, but the life cycle is telling us what is happening in the background. Once your components, once we embed this component here on the page, any of the page, and if we have components, right, like a parent to means if we have embedded nested components or single component, whatever it is, so this component will follow this life cycle. You guys are getting? So how this will get loaded, I will show you what is this DOM is. So the DOM is, if you inspect this, if you right click and inspect it, one second, I will take it at the bottom. So once you inspect it, you will see element tab is there, right, in which you will see the whole HTML code, right, whole HTML page. This is the doc type document which is created for this page, this whole page, this document HTML file got created. But once we put it like, once you put it this here, only one, but once you put it this component, right, for this component as well, we can see different. If you inspect this particular thing, right, you can see these things is already here. So if you hover your mouse, right, see this lightning card, and this is our component, right? See, so this is the HTML for our component, right? Yes, so this is the whole markup for this component. And if you try to edit it, right, if you click on edit, sorry, if you right click on it and see edit as HTML, you guys can edit this particular HTML thing. This div, you can see it contains lots of things. So whatever things we have here, it contains here, right? Imperative demo. This is the title of the lightning card, right? That we have given. So all these things. So whenever you're any page loaded, right? Any page loaded, one document object model gets created at the backend. Means this element tag is nothing but your document, HTML document. So this is nothing but your DOM, and and the point I'm talking about, right? Parent is inserted into the DOM, meaning this HTML will get created for the parent component, right? HTML thing, this HTML will get created, not the whole HTML, but in this whole HTML file, your parent components HTML will get created. Then what will happen? Connected callback on the parent component. Meaning once it's loaded, right? Very first, what you want to do is if you want to set some values and onload, let's say you want to fetch data from Salesforce and display on the UI. So we can use this connected callback. We'll say in detail what are all the things that we can do here in this connected callback, and what are all the things which we cannot do, which are not supported in these different life cycle methods. So I hope you guys understood this DOM. What is this DOM is? So DOM is nothing but this element tab will give. DOM is nothing but this whole document, right, in HTML doc type. So this is nothing but your DOM, and into it for your component it will insert these tags, right? Means it will enable for your this component as well. If you inspect it, and you guys can see this is the whole your component, right? You guys can see different components here as well, right? Like wire properties, demo batch 3, JS fundamentals, conditional rendering. These are the many components that we have already put it here on this page, right? That's why it's showing here the different divs. So once page loaded, right, your components will get inserted here in the DOM. So in this document file, right? So this is how your component looks like here. So HTML in the HTML form, right? So next thing, right? So this is the life cycle of your component. So and last rendered callback, we'll say in detail. So what is constructor? I have different document here, and then we'll see the example. I have the example ready with me. One simple example. So the constructor, right? So when we have seen that, right? When component gets loaded, let me open here diagram. So very first we have seen that constructor get called, right? Parent constructor get called. So what is happening there in the constructor? So if you guys can see, when the constructor is called, then instance of the component is created, like we create instance for the Apex class, right? And if we call the constructor, meaning that instance of that class gets created, right? So similarly we have same thing here. So in this constructor, what in this constructor we don't have access to the public properties, that we need to keep it in mind. So component, they are not yet exist, right? Because this we cannot access the public properties of the component as they are not yet in existence. Also, if we have included the child component inside our component, right? If we have nested components, parent and child related components, we cannot access the element of the child component, right? So we cannot access this. We need to keep it in mind that we cannot access child elements in the parent element in the constructor, because because we have already we have seen that the flow of the component is parent to child, right? So once this all the things will get happen for the parent, then and then all the child similar things, similar cycle will get followed to the child as well, and then rendered callback, then full parent component will get loaded along with the child component. So that's why we cannot access the element of the child components, and also we cannot access the public properties. The child component will get initiated after the parent component initiated, right? Here we have seen that first of all parent component will get initiated, right? Constructor will get initiated, and then child components constructor will get initiated, meaning it will create this thing first and then child components next. We have super method there, so it's a mandatory to there in the constructor. So is this super keyword we need to mention in the constructor? I'll show you that. So as every LWC component extend the lightning element which it has its constructor, so we are not supposed to bypass calling this parent class constructor. So basically what it's saying is we have to necessarily, it's necessary to implement this or use this super keyword in the constructor. So what are all the things are there that we have allowed in the constructor, and the things that it's not allowed in the constructor? So before we go ahead, this it's a best practice to use the getter and setters to get the values of the variable and set the values to the variables instead of constructor, right? It's a best practice that we can follow. So we can use the getter and setter methods. So what are all the things that are supported in the constructor? So if you guys can see, we cannot display toast messages in the constructor, right? Because the toast message uses the custom event, right? The events, we need to dispatch event which is not allowed in the constructor. So we cannot fire events in the constructor, or we cannot display toast messages in the constructor. Next thing, we can set the value to the properties, right? And we can also define the variables, right? We can, if you want to default by default set the value to the properties, we can definitely define in this constructor. By default, if let's say on the load of the component we want to display some data from the local, then definitely we can set some values. Then we can also call the apex method from here. We can also use this UI record APIs. We'll see how does it works in the later sessions, but we can call the UI APIs like UI record APIs. And what are things that it's not allowing to us? So what are the things in the constructor that are not allowed? So we cannot access the elements attribute which are not exist yet. So in the constructor level, constructor till the constructor those elements attributes are not exist, so that's why we cannot access it. We cannot create and dispatch custom events from the constructor, right? And we cannot manipulate the DOM. So the DOM we saw, right? We cannot modify that DOM. So these are all the things that belongs to constructor, what is supported and what is not supported, and what is the best practices. So best practices are saying instead of constructor based, we can use this getter and setter method to set and get the data. Okay, next thing is connected callback. So what is this connected callback? So whenever your component gets inserted into the DOM, then this connected callback will get called. So what this method is doing is it will load your public properties, all the public properties from the parent component, right? And this method also we can call the apex methods, which requires public properties as a parameter. And as of now, public properties are existence, meaning all the public properties are available, as we have seen in this life cycle, that once constructor gets loaded, it will load all the public properties, right? Then parent will get inserted into DOM and then connected callback, meaning we can access all the public properties here. So in the connected callback, we can also perform any logic on load of the component. If you want to do something, we can write logic in this connected callback. So we have also one method there where we can use, if this component is connected to the DOM, means connected is the component is inserted into the DOM, we can check it by using this is connected. And these are the things that are allowed, that we have allowed in the connected callback method. So we can fire custom events, which is allowed us, right? On load of the component, we can fire custom event. We can also display toast messages based on our requirement. We can also use navigation services. I will talk about it, what is navigation is, once we finish with this life cycle. So we can also call UI APIs. We can use the message channel. We can also subscribe and unsubscribe from the message channel, right? It's just, these are different concepts. We're going to see it in the upcoming sessions. And also access the element of the component, right? In the constructor, we were not able to access the component element, right? So here in the connected callback, we are able to access the element, but still they are saying, note that we do not have access to any child components element till now. They are not exist, right? Because the life cycle is saying that still we are here in the connected callback, right? So we are not able to access this element yet because this is not exist yet. It's yet to load, so that's why we cannot access it. So we cannot call this access the element of the child component. Okay, so what are the things that are not allowed? We cannot access the element of the child because they do not exist yet, right? Because they have not loaded yet, that's why we cannot access this, right? Next, this is all about the connected callback. These are the all things that are supported, and this is the things which is not supported. We can access the element, but of the current component, of the parent component only, not the child component. Keep it in mind. Make a note of it. Rendered callback. We have seen this rendered callback, right? When this render callback get called, will say it after it execute after components is completely rendered on the screen, right? So meaning all the properties, right? All the things are loaded on the screen. At that time, this rendered callback get caught. So it's a unique to the LWC, right? And the rest of HTML component, HTML custom element specification. It's a very unique. This is what they're saying here. Unique thing in LWC component. So if you guys look at this statement, it should be guarded with the conditions that does not trigger and initiate rendering loop. So meaning we need to take care if we are using this method, we should take care that it should not getting into the recursion. So it may harm your functionality. So we need to put some conditions under this, right? So it will not harm, it will not getting into the recursion. So they are saying that the condition that does not trigger and initiate rendering loop, meaning we have to check the conditions which will not again call this render method, right? So again, so it will get into the recursion, rendering will get into the recursion and it will harm your functionality. So this component will also render whenever your value of the property changes, right? Anything on your property changes, your components render callback will get called, or your component also rendered when any change happen to your properties, right? Whatever properties you have defined in the JavaScript. So the flow of this method is, right, how when this method will get called. So this method will get called from the child component to the parent component. So meaning we guys already have seen that rendered callback of the parent called after calling of the parent component, sorry, after calling of the child component. So first of all, child component will get loaded, right? Child component will get loaded, and then child components rendered callback will get called, and after call of child's components render callback, parent components render callback will get called, because this child component is a part of parent component. So once parent components gets fully loaded, then and then this rendered callback method will get called. So next thing, we can perform different business logics in this phase, right? In this rendering phase, based on your requirement, we can do whatever things we want to do in the rendered callback method. We can also access the element of the component, parent component only. Parent component, they have not mentioned child component, but I believe we can also access the element of the child component because we are here now, right? And child component is also loaded. So we can access element of the parent as well as child components, right? Then we can also call the apex method if you want to load some data. If you want to fetch some data, we can also call the apex method. We can create custom event and dispatch custom events. We can use the events to the communication between the parent and child components. We can also utilize these post messages, and we can call the UI APIs. We can also use the navigation services. So what are all the things that are not allowed in the render callback? So it's not allowed to change the state of the component that is setting the properties and values. This is one thing. We cannot update wire adapter configurations object property in the render callback, as it can result in an initiate loop. So what will happen? So as we have seen here, right? So this component will get called if any change happen to any property, right? So that's why they're saying that wire adapter configuration object properties, we cannot update these properties of the wire adapter, right? So the property that we have wired up, we cannot change the values, because if we use it, then what will happen? This render callback render method will get into the loop, right? Getting the recursion. That's what they're saying. Don't update a reactive property or field in rendered callback. Again, the same thing they are telling, that the reactive property. What do you mean by reactive property? Reactive property meaning whenever any property changes, right? Any change happens to any property, it will render your component. So again, this method will get called, and again it will getting into the loop, right? It will initiate the loop. So this is what about the render callback. Now the next method of the life cycle is disconnected callback. So what do you mean by disconnected callback? So when the component gets removed from your DOM, right? Like we have seen this, right? This is the DOM for our component, right? Once component inserted, this DOM get added here. But when your component gets removed from this DOM, right? Meaning if we navigate to another page, if we refresh the page, this component will get, this disconnected callback method will get called. Means whenever your component get removed from this DOM, right? Whenever your page loaded, your component will get inserted into DOM, and when you're moving out from this page, your component will get removed from this DOM. So this is what this statement is saying. So we can put some logic, or we can remove on the remove of this, right? We can clear the property values if it's not required, right? So let's say we have implemented this lightning message service here in this component, and which is retrieving data from another LWC component. We can just unsubscribe this channel in the disconnected callback, and we can also clear clear values of other properties as in the disconnected callback. So we can, these are the things are possible in the disconnected callback. Remove the cache, remove the element listener if we have, if we are listening the events and all the steps are there, we can remove it from it, and we can also unsubscribe this LMS channels if we have subscribed it. Okay, next thing, error callback, right? Error callback. So while in your component, right, we have embedded this component here on this page, but if this component is throwing any exception, any errors, like we did something wrong in this implementation, that's why it's throwing an exception error, right? So in this scenario, what will happen? It gets executed when failure or error is captured during the life cycle phases, right? So while running all these methods, right, while running these methods, if anything get fails, right, if anything went wrong, then this error callback method will get called, and we can simply capture the error. And if you want to display the errors on the UI, we can display it. So also it's a unique to the unique element to your HTML file or your DOM, right? This is what Salesforce is saying. So it helps us to long the stack information and render an alternative template if error is encounters, right, in the child component. So we can get extra idea what exactly happened and what to do next. So we can handle these exceptions or errors if your logic fail and result in error. We can simply handle that errors and display on the UI like a standard error message. We can uh, get the information from this error callback and put it in the UI. So you will get exact idea what is happening, what is causes to throwing this error message, right? So these are all 5 methods are there in the life cycle, right? So keep it in mind if someone asks you what is component life cycle and component life cycle hooks, you can simply go with this constructor connected callback, this rendered callback, disconnected callback, and error callback. Now I hope you guys understood it. Let's move to the example, right? Example that we have ready with you. So I'll just create one lightning component for you. I'll go here and I'll simply hit this command. Lifecycle demo bash 3. I'll hit enter, and what I'll do is I will similarly I'm just copying this as we have it ready here. So lifecycle bash 3, right? I will just replace, I'll take it out and paste it here. It will allow us to embed our component, right? Next thing, what is next thing is, where is that? Okay, this is the just a lightning card. Okay, so I will take one lightning card. Lightning card, and I will give title to it. Life cycle component life cycle demo. Okay, I'm just taking this and let's see what is there in this JS file. We just have a lightning card here. Now what are all things? We have constructor, right? Let's go into this JavaScript class, right? Constructor we need to call into it, as we mentioned super, we need to mention, right? And then we can put simple console.log. We are in constructor. Okay, this is the constructor. Next thing, we have already seen what are all the things that we can do in the constructor. Then we have connected callback. We'll again take it console.log. We are in connected callback. Next, rendered callback. Console.log. Into it, I'm just printing we are in rendered callback. Okay, next is fully disconnected callback, and simply into it again we'll be printing console.log. We are in disconnected callback. So what I'll do is I'll just deploy this. Right, what we did is we have just simply written the definition of this life cycle methods, right? These are main methods, but if you want to capture, right, we can also implement this uh, error callback. Okay, so only this thing is there. What I'll do is I'll go back here and I'll simply edit it, and we will embed this component here and we'll show you. So life cycle, just search for the component name. Yes, life cycle demo batch 3. I'm just putting it here. I will just take out these components. Okay. So post flow interview. Okay. I will just save this. Changes are saved. Go back to this page. Yeah, component lifecycle demo. And if you just inspect it, you can see that DOM has created for it, right? This is your DOM for this component. Right, so this is whole DOM for your component. And now if you click on the console tab, right, you will see this debug statement, right? We are in constructor, we are in connected callback, we are in a render callback, but we don't see disconnected callback, right? Because we are still here in this page, right? You guys can see it's sequentially happening, even though you change the sequence here, right? It doesn't matter where you put it, but your these methods will get called. That's if you put here, it doesn't matter. right? This sequence doesn't matter, but the life cycle will follow that sequence. Those, okay. One second. Looks like we want to put constructor on the top. All right. So what we'll do is, I was thinking, okay, still it's not happening. Still it's giving here something went wrong with this. Okay, let it be as it's working, right? What we'll do is dash 3, right? Okay, let's deploy this. Okay, it successfully run. Something went wrong on it. So what we'll do is, I'm not sure if this matters or not, but still we can just give it a try and let's deploy it. It shouldn't matter. See, and if we refresh this page, right, you'll see again the same sequence here. See, we are in constructor, we are in connected callback, we are in the render callback. So whenever your instance get created here, firstly this method will get called, then connected callback, which is nothing but your means whatever things we have already seen what we need to do here, right? Next, a rendered callback, right? If you want to access properties of child component, those will be available here if we have nested component. And now if we navigate somewhere, if I just go back and come back to this page, or what I'll do is I will navigate to somewhere from this page. Okay, you guys can see if here where is that disconnected callback? So now if I refresh this, okay, if I reload this page, I want to see that 1 second. Disconnected callback. I go to this page. Okay, let's go to the account. Contacts. Okay, I don't have any records here. I have contacts. If you guys can see, right, if I navigate to the different record, right, different record, then this disconnected callback method get called, right? See, what I'll do is I will clear this. I will go back to home page, and you guys can see these are the methods, right? And we don't see this disconnected method callback get called, right? Means once we navigate to another page and get back to this page, this is what I observed here. So this is how your component life cycle will work. So we need to think about, or we need to choose this method based on our requirement. Any doubts, guys, so far? So this is all about your component life cycle. We haven't used here, but you guys can definitely use it in your actual LWC project, and you can simply capture the errors here in that method, and you can display those error methods here by rendering the templates, right? We have seen already conditionally how do we conditionally render the components. We can simply utilize the templates conditions here and display that error message.